Hey Bookaholics, and welcome back to another video. Today I am on the floor. I'm on the floor because I am surrounded by books. I read 30 series, or at least attempted to read 30 full series in 2023. And I DNF'd 5, but I did actually manage to read the rest. So I'm going to be going through the series that I binged or attempted to binge in this year. So I'm going to be taking you through all of these books. I'm going to try and keep it a bit shorter than usual. So these aren't full reviews. Any ones that I do have reviews for will be in my reviews playlist, which I will leave linked down below. Because there's 30 books, I'm going to timestamp it in the description box where I'm going to do it in clumps of 5. So I have 5 DNFs, which was nice and convenient. So I have 5 DNFs, and then I have 5 series that were not the best, 5 series that were fine, 5 series that were good, 5 series that were excellent, and 5 series that were absolutely awesome. So as I said, in the timestamps down below in case you're not interested in some of these, but we're going to start out with the series that I DNF'd. I have 2 romantasy series and 1 romance series on here, so things were not looking very romantic for me in 2023. But the first one that I'm going to talk about is the Healer of Kingdoms series by Ingrid Seymour. I didn't even talk about this on my channel. I literally got, I think, about 60 pages in and then just deleted it from everywhere because it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling. And I was really excited for this series because I had heard, I can't remember who I had heard talk about it, and it was going to be concluding in June, so I thought I'll start it in February and then I will conclude it in June. Fantastic. I'm looking for more fantasy romance that the whole series is out. Great. And then I got into reading it and I just was not gelling with the writing style at all. I couldn't get on with the writing style. Nothing wrong with the book particularly. I hadn't got far enough in for it to be anything wrong with the book. It just was not working for me. You know, kind of like when, have you ever been on like a blind date or like a Tinder app date and then you go and you arrive and you're like, oh, mistakes were made. It was kind of like that. It's like nothing wrong with the person. I don't know you, but I'm not attracted to you. It was kind of like that. And again, I'm a little bit over the retellings now. Like, I am very picky with my retellings. I prefer retellings of classic novels than I do of fairy tales at this point. So yeah, it wasn't for me. It was a shame. Moving on. The other romantasy series that I DNF'd was, again, not really anything wrong with the series. That is the Furyk Saga by A.E. Rain. This is one where I read the first book and it was fine. I didn't have any huge problems with it. I just didn't connect with the romance. I didn't buy into the relationship between the 2 characters, and I loved her and I couldn't be bothered with him. He annoyed the heck out of me. I would have read it for her, not for him. I would have continued, but it's a 6-book series, so I'd have to buy 5 more books after this aggressively fine first book, and I'm sure the series gets better, but I was not willing to actually put money on it getting better, so I didn't bother continuing. It was one of those, it was like a bit of a soft DNF, and then when I was compiling this list at the end of the year and I was going through my series, I was like, I'm not going to read that. I'm not going to binge that. So it's a series DNF. It's a shame because I really wanted to love this series because conceptually it was really cool, and like I said, there were some really cool elements to it, but not enough for me to actually go buy 5 more books. Another of my DNFs, my other romance DNF, is sadly the Boyfriend Project trilogy by Farah Roshan. This one is one that I feel quite bad about because it's not the series' fault, but I'm not a contemporary romance girly and I kind of tried to guinea pig my way with it. I read Honey and Spice this year by Balu Babalola and I actually really enjoyed it. So I was like, okay, cool, maybe I am a contemporary romance girly. And then I read the Boyfriend Project. I was like, I'm really not a romance girly apparently. The first book was aggressively fine. I think for romance fans, it's a really decent book. For people like me that are not into romance, it's what you expect of romance. The reason I picked this series is because I really liked the foundation of it being about all of these women who were cheated on by a man, and instead of hating each other, they become friends, make a pact, which is basically like, screw men, they're not getting any of this. And I really liked that notion. Conceptually, it was really cool. If you want that female friendship dynamic, would highly recommend still. It's just not for me. The first book was 3 stars. It was fine. I'm not going to go pay money for the other 2. One I am very depressed about is the Tudor Court trilogy by Philippa Gregory. If you've seen my top 10 series list, I think it's my most recent one still, then you'll know that I really liked the Cousins War series by Philippa Gregory, which tells the story of War of the Roses, but from the perspectives of the women. One of the things I really love that Philippa Gregory does is that she takes contemporary for their time rumors about these women and makes them fact, and then is still like, so what? I really like that. And that continued in this series. However, we have some very problematic elements in a couple of the books. One book where I basically had to DNF. There were a couple of books before that that were just meh. The series was not working for me the same way as the Cousins War series was. There were too many problematic things going on, and she was throwing women under the bus. Like, this woman does not like Anne Boleyn, and I don't think she likes Elizabeth I either. So do with that what you will. It was very much like in the previous one, you didn't really, you had just women that were fucking each other over, but because of social circumstances. In this one, it was just, there are some women who are awful kind of narrative, like Mean Girls, and I just was not into that. So this is gone. It's a shame. And arguably my saddest, most heartbreaking, gut-wrenching DNF of my entire life. I DNF'd Soldier's Son by Robin Hobb. Robin Hobb, I thought was one of my favourite authors. Turns out she just authors my favourite series. The Realm of the Eldlings is a part of my personality. It is the best thing I have ever read or arguably will ever read. I love that series so much. And I didn't like this. Oh my god. So in the Realm of the Eldlings, you have some very annoying characters that are very difficult to follow, but you love them anyway. They're real, they feel like real human beings, and you want what's best for them, and you want to shake them. You know, Fitz can be so annoying. So many people are just like, oh my god, Fitz. Fitz is annoying. But you love him anyway. And then you have Wintro can be quite annoying. Jesus Christ, can Thymara be annoying? But you love them and they feel like real people and you want what's best for them and you're rooting for them even when they're being absolute morons. Now, if you took how annoying those characters are but took away any sense of giving a shit about these characters, may I introduce you to Neva, who I really struggled to give a shit about. So then I'm just putting up with this really annoying man and I don't know why I'm putting up with him. I DNF'd, maybe a soft DNF. I might give it another go when I've got more distance from Realm of the Eldlings, because in 2022 I did finish the Fitz and the Fool trilogy, so it's only been a year, so I might need a bit more distance between Realm of the Eldlings before I get into this one so I don't compare them in my brain. But I was struggling and it was putting me in a reading slump and it was making me so sad. I at least have soft DNF'd Soldier's Son. Now we're going to get into bad series that I concluded and then aggressively mediocre series that I read. So, starting with the only 1-star series that I actually finished, because I rage read this series. All of the books in the series are 1-star. If you've been around on the channel for a while, you know what series it is. And that's Fallen World by Laura Thalassa. Now, I really enjoyed the Bargainer series. It was a good time. So I was like, let's read more Laura Thalassa. Shouldn't have read more Laura Thalassa. Really should not have read more Laura Thalassa. I hated everything about this. Like, I have a rant review. I'm going to leave that. I'm not going to talk about it. I will get angry. I am angry at this existence. So yeah, another series I'm angry at because I really liked the first 2 books. Like, they were pretty decent reads. And then the last book, really, the ending of this whole series, just and that's The Queen of the Tearling by Erica Johansson. Books 1 and 2 were really good. It started to decline at the end of book 2. I didn't know if that was middle book syndrome. I was fine with it still. Then by about halfway through book 3, I was like, okay. And then we got to the ending of book 3 and I wanted to throw it across the room. I have a review for this series as well, so go check it out if you want to. Again, not great. And now I'm going to get into ones that I had one too many problems with for me to love, but that I still enjoyed and still wouldn't necessarily deter you from reading. I have on here is Banners of Blood by Mark Alder. This is a duology that is historical fantasy. It's about the 100 Years' War, and during the 100 Years' War, the kings of England and France should be able to call down angels to fight at their side. But the angels are not listening to the King of England. So France is winning. So it turns out that with the help of this mysterious boy, England might need to resort to the forces of Hell. Conceptually very cool. It's more historical fiction than fantasy. So if you're not into historical fiction and you just kind of like put up with it for the fantasy, this is not for you. I liked it. It was a little bit too historical fiction in the where are the women concept, and also just a little bit too dude bro for me. It read like historical fiction in the typical like Essex Dogs kind of sense. It was more readable to me than Essex Dogs. I did DNF Essex Dogs, but it had all of the things that made me fall out of love with the genre of historical fiction, because it's just like, I don't want to keep reading about these same types of men. Like, stop projecting your 1950s ideals of manlyhood onto 13th century men. Yeah, I said it. The next one I have is another romantasy series. Again, not the year for romantasy with me. And that is the Vicious Lost Boys series. I actually, when I was compiling the list, I realized I hadn't logged them on Goodreads, like for some reason, because I binge read the whole series. I read the first one in February, and then in May I just binged through. But I'd only logged it on my series tracker on Compile. I hadn't logged it on Goodreads. So, but they were decent enough. Like, they were fun. But one of the problems I have with heterosexual reverse harems, and you'll see what I mean by that by a series that comes up later, is that it's basically just one girl fucking her way around a load of guys. So it's just like, tag you're it, now you get some pussy. And it just doesn't work for me because they're not in a relationship. And one of the problems is, for example, in this one, you have a girl who is shagging brothers. Like, they are literal biological brothers, and she's shagging both of them. Like, it seems a little bit too close to incest for my liking. Like, I liked the fantastical elements that were there. I liked that it played with the whole ideal of Peter Pan. But oh my god, the actual reverse harem part, I struggled with. And the last one that I have in this category is one that was decent enough, but I felt a little bit like I wanted more from it. And that's the Riverside series by Ellen Kushner. Now, this is a good series. This actually could go in the next category up. But for the sake of doing it in fives, this one I had problems with because, so they're all separate books that are in a series that are in the same world that have overlapping characters, and sometimes I felt like some of the overlapping characters had a little bit too much of a personality metamorphosis from one book to another. I also wanted more queer representation in here than we have. It is one of those series that is constantly pitched as being like queer, and we do have queer characters, but I'd also heard that this was a queer normative society, and it is and it isn't. Like, it's one of those where it's like, oh, we know people are gay and they're shagging each other, just don't do it in public. So it's like, sure, like, queerness is generally accepted, but also not. So I felt a little bit catfished there as well. So there were lots of elements that I liked. This is pitched as fantasy. It's not really. It's only fantasy because it's not set in our world, but there is no actual fantasy to the story. So do bear that in mind as well. I kind of didn't know that going in, but it is a very interesting, it's like Dangerous Liaisons. I've said this before, you know, there's lots of duels, lots of courtly, extravagant style characters. You have the very, very decisive divide of classes between upper class and lower class. Overall, decent enough, but did have some problems with it. Now we're going to go into the not bad section, and I'm going to start out with another romance series. Don't judge me. That's The Chronicles of the One by Nora Roberts. This is one where I liked the setup. It was kind of like X-Men in a post-apocalyptic world where, so you've had this disease and then certain people have died from it and then certain people have gained powers from it, and then those people are pursued for having powers. It's a whole thing. And the romance element was the least interesting part to me, and the part that's at the most forefront for a lot of the story, because I didn't care about the characters. I cared more about the setting and the culture and the society, which we don't get as much of because that's not the point of the series. That's not the series' fault. So not terrible, but just not what I wanted from the series, which is not the series' fault. So we're just going to have to agree to disagree on this one. Another one that I did enjoy quite a lot, but that I'm not going to really think about very much a few months from now, is the Brethren series by Robin Young. These are just, the rest of these series on this part of the list are kind of just forgettable. Like, there's nothing inherently wrong with this series. It's a decent historical fiction. If you're into Templars, then it's a pretty good shout. I just don't feel very strongly about it. Like, this whole category here is just literally ones that, like, there's nothing wrong with them apart from the fact that I have not connected with them on any level that I'm like, oh my god, everyone go read this, and oh my god, I remember that scene 6 years from now. Like, I don't care. So there's nothing wrong with the book. The book's not done anything to me. It hasn't hurt me. But it's just, you know, I'm not going to remember them. Another one that while reading it I really liked, I've written a very positive review about it. It's enjoyable if it's your kind of thing. I like some of the topics that are discussed about it, but again, I'm just not going to think about it. Like, I already forget a lot about these books, and that is the Books of Amber Duology by Tasha Suri. I've heard that this is not Tasha Suri's best works. I know that her newer series is liked better, so at least I have that going for me, but as this one currently stands, it's just fine. Like, I would have liked to have enjoyed it more, but the series didn't do anything that I disliked. I enjoyed everything about it. I just didn't connect strongly with it enough for it to be one that I would think about, that I would actively go out of my way to remember. The exact same thing can be said for the Greta Helsing series. I enjoyed them. They were easy reading, they were fun, they played with some really interesting concepts. I did think that it would be more humorous than it is, so I did feel a little bit let down by this series. It was romance, it was cute, it was fine. I wanted so badly to love this series, and it was just fine. So this one I'm just kind of a bit sad about. And one that I actually really did like, and that I thought maybe it won't stay with me, but it's actually staying with me more than I thought it would, is The Majors and the Mundane series by Julianne Munich. This is one that I think it did exactly what it said on the tin. Unlike the other ones where I'm like, I feel like I should have this super strong connection to the books, but I don't. Majors in the Mundane sets out to just be a fun, light time. So this is one that I'm not necessarily going to be like aggressively pushing on people and be like, oh my god, everyone go read this. If you want just some casual, light fun, if you want some light reading in the fantasy romance fair, you don't want smut, you just want something that's nice and sweet and cute, has an element of fairy tale-ness to it, an element of Regency romance to it, all in one. It did exactly what it said on the tin. It's not one that I have really, really strong feelings for, hence why it's in this section, but I don't think you're kind of supposed to, in a way. It's supposed to be one that you just have fun with. It's in this category, but by its own design, almost. It's just supposed to be one that you just have some light fun with. Great for over the Christmas period. Great if you're in a reading slump. Would still recommend. Now we're going to get into some series that are pretty dang good. They're not new favourites or anything, but they're pretty decent reads, and I'd recommend you check them out if they sound like your kind of thing. The first one I have is the Empire series by Raymond D. Feist and Janny Wirtz. This is one where it's quite dense. It's a lot of description, it's a lot of reading. It's if Robert Jordan wrote Game of Thrones. So there's a lot of politicking, there's a lot of backstabbing and maneuvering, but there's also just a lot of describing things. It's very densely written, unlike A Song of Ice and Fire. So do with that what you will. But oh my god, can you see the influences this series had on later works? Because it did what it did really well. If you like the dense, really descriptive Tolkien, Robert Jordan level of description and immersion, fantastic. If you like all of the political machinations and feuding houses that Game of Thrones has, Empire. So decent series, would recommend. Not one, again, not a new favourite because it was a lot. Took a lot of reading, but a really good time nonetheless, and would recommend, especially if you're wanting to get into more classic fantasy. Talking of classic fantasy that is densely written, but still pretty bloody decent, the Bitterbind series by Cecilia Dart Thornton. This series is never talked about. I have never heard any of you talk about this. I have one person I follow on Instagram who has posted a photo of this, but it's a good time. If you want fairy tale-esque fantasy, but then make it epic fantasy and then make it super immersive, because oh my god, there are descriptions in here. But it was a really fun time. I love the romance. We've got some interesting representation for mutism in the first book as well. We have someone who learns sign language, someone who takes the time to talk to someone through sign language as well. Overall, really good series. And if you're looking for classic fantasy, these are the two I'd recommend. Getting into some Afrofuturism, however, we've got Binti by Nnedi Okorafor. This is one that is a decent series, but they're novellas. And I'm not a novella girly for the most part. I have very few novellas that I'm like, oh my god, yes. When they hit hard. These were good. I had a good time with them. They were very insightful. I really liked the way that Nnedi Okorafor writes. I love the way she plays with society and social discussions. I love the conversations that can be brought about from every single one of her books. That being said, because they're novellas, I didn't feel as strongly connected to them as I have Nnedi Okorafor's actual novels, for example, like Who Fears Death, which still holds a place in my soul. So it was a good time, and I would recommend recommend if you want novellas, if you want to get into Afrofuturism, especially if you just want a taste test for Afrofuturism. It's a really good way to go. As a beginner's guide to Afrofuturism, would recommend, but not a new favorite for me by this author. Another one that I think had a good premise, but that is also encumbered by its formatting, is the Copycat series by Jen Lyons. This is first book was a collection of essentially short stories. It's like a D&D style, so each new section of the campaign was like a short story, and the first book was written like that and then compiled into a novel. And I thought, okay, well, we'll read this one and it can be like a prequel collection of short stories, and then the next two will be novels, because obviously they were written after this was compiled into a novel. No, it turns out the whole series was written that way, so it's very, very episodic. So as much as that can be really fun, and I had a really good time with it because it was fun, and it'd be a really good one to base a D&D campaign on, it leaves it harder for you to connect with the characters because you're seeing them in different situations all the time, and you don't get as much in-depth backstory, as in-depth character building that you would get from a full-length just standard novel. It was good. I had a good time. If you want something that is just action-packed and a lot of fun and not overly deep, then this is a good series. And the last of my good ones is a bloody fantasy romance. Yes, higher up on the list. We've got the For the Wolf or the Wilder Wood series by Hannah Witten. I really liked this. I liked both of the romances separately. The reason actually this isn't any higher is just that in the second book, there is one POV of all the POVs that I wasn't overly fussed about, but I had a fantastic time with this series. I found it a lot of fun. It's great for fans of Uprooted, The Wolf and the Woodsman, just overall that like foresty setting, fairy tale-esque retelling, but definitely takes its own route to get there. We've got some really fun romances. The first one is Marriage of Convenience and the second one is Enemies to Lovers. Good time, good romances. Coming in with some bloody great reads, we're going to start with an obvious one, and that is The Age of Madness by Jo Abercrombie. This is the, at the moment, last series in the First Law world, and it is industrial First Law. And this one is following descendants of characters from the first series. I really like the way that Jo Abercrombie actually took the direction of this one because I was concerned about it, but I actually really enjoyed the discussions that we had, the social criticism. It's still very nihilistic. So if you are going to read Jo Abercrombie for a purpose, the only purpose is nihilism. All right, that's it. It did what Jo Abercrombie does really well. Another one that is just an author that I love doing what they do well is the Parasitology series by Myra Grant. I still prefer Feed or the Newsflesh series, but if you like the Newsflesh series, you'll like this because they have a lot of overlapping value. And one of the things that I really appreciate about Myra Grant is how grounded in science her pseudoscience is, which makes the line between what is real and what is fictional of her making for the series very blurred, which makes it feel very realistic and very grounded. Which when you are reading about, I don't know, parasites taking over humans, a bit scary, not gonna lie. So I think that her approach to writing sci-fi is absolutely incredible because of how realistic it feels, easy to root for characters, decent enough reveals, and I had a good time with it. If you're used to reading Myra Grant, I don't think this one will come as much of a surprise, but it's a fun time. The next one I have is the Queens of Frenthia series. This is one that I was surprised at how much I liked it actually, because I thought it would just be like a cute, quaint, fun time, very whimsical, wishy-washy. It wasn't. It actually had some very intense discussions. I also didn't know that each book in the series follows a different queen. I'm not going to spoil exactly how that works, but it follows a different queen in each one. And I really appreciated the fact we had queens from different backgrounds with different intentions and different hopes and aspirations and how that can work within a kingdom. It had really good discussion points for a series that I genuinely thought was just going to be, like I said, whimsical and fun. It ended up being a really beautiful series, but also one that does also handle some heavy topics. It handles them in a lighter way. It's not going to drag you through the prickly bush, but it's not so light in areas I thought it would be, and I really appreciated that. Getting into some actual favourites now, we've got The Losers by Harley LaRue. Talking of reverse harems that don't work for me, like in the Fisher's Lost Boys, this reverse harem works for me, and that is because it is bi as fuck. We've got all of the boys are bisexual. All of the boys are fucking each other before you chuck the girl into the mix. She's just an additional piece to the pie. She's a linchpin, if you will. but they're all already fucking each other. No one's related to each other, so it doesn't get weird. And we've got a bully romance, but not really. And it's BDSM, and it was a load of fun. I really like the tropes that come with reverse harem. That's why I keep trying them, because I like the setup of the types of characters that you have. And you do basically always have the same kind of characters, and you do in this one, but I just think it was played with really well. Also, all of the boys are basically emo, so I just kept picturing all the guys that I used to find hot from emo bands when I was younger, and it was amazing. And then just before we get into my top 5, we have Beartown by Frederick Backman. I sobbed at this. I'm angry at this in a good way. Oh, this series for a contemporary. Oh my god, did it hit hard? What the hell is going on in this town? What is wrong with this town? It was such a good time. This is a hockey story, which again, sports ones not normally my thing, but it's not. It's about a town coming together and about it finding its feet and how it tackles things that as a community can be very difficult to overcome. And I thought it was handled amazingly. I love these books. If you're a contemporary fan, just read it. It's amazing. That's all I have to say. But now we're going to get into my top 5. Now we're going to get into the ones that I love the most. Coming in at number 5, I have the Poison Wars series by Sam Hawke. This is one where I really loved the characters. I really loved the way that their interactions happened, how realistic they felt, the type of situations that these different characters were in, and how that affected the other characters was fantastic. I really found that this was a really good mix of, I had a fun time reading it, but not at the expense that my brain switched off, because I'm one of those that if my brain's not stimulated, even if I'm having a fun time, I might struggle with it and lose attention span. So they're chunky books, so I was worried about that, but I didn't lose attention at all. It retained my attention, it retained my brain stimulation, while also I had a really fun reading experience with it. Coming in at number 4, we've got the Texacalan series. Loved this. This is one that is not necessarily fun reading, but oh my god, my brain was stimulated. This has so much about communication and language, how people interact with each other, how different cultures will display their emotions, their posture, the way that they will hold themselves. It was so intricate the way it used language. Loved it. Also, just space opera the way I want it. Because space opera is normally just let's go shoot down big shit, boom boom. That's not me. This one, intergalactic politics and communication and just all of those good things. I had a really good time with this series. Coming in at number 3, we're gonna go dark, and we've got the Godblind series by Anna Stevens. There's a lot of gore in this. It's a very dark series. Hey look, we're matching. And yeah, I had an amazing time reading this series because it's really easy to get through, really consumable. I didn't want to put it down, and then you have scenes where you want to look away but you gotta keep reading, and the way that we had characters interacting with each other, the depictions of those characters, the world, the conflicts, the politics, everything about this was amazing. My second favorite series of the year was the Lady Trent series. Regency, but then make it kick-ass, make it also like sciencey and discovery and exploring the world, but make it dragons, make it fantasy. Yes, flipping please. Lady Trent, Isabella is amazing. I love her. She's got to be one of the best protagonists I have ever read. I loved the different topics and social circumstances that we discussed, the way that it approaches different looks on societies, the discussions around things like colonialism, sexism, homophobia, just so many things were discussed in this series. I love it with my entire being. But if you think that I seemed hyped about that series, coming in at number 1, I have The Chronicles of the Bitch Queen by K.S. Veloso. This is the best series I've read this year. It's going to be on very, very high on my top 10 ever series list. If I said that Realm of the Eldlings was part of my personality, so is this. It's part of my personality. It's who I am as a person now. I love this series so much. Talion has got to be one of the best protagonists I've ever read, same as Isabella, but in the messiest way possible. So in the same way that Isabella is very collected and she's got her shit together and you're like, yes girl, you go get him even when society tells you not to. When I tell you Talion has got to be one of the messiest protagonists I've read, and I love her so much. And the way that she is as a mother, the way she is as a queen, the way she is as a warrior, so many different facets of her, so well crafted, so realistic. The fact that she's not a monolith, I loved this series. so much. But that's it. Those are all of the series that I have read or attempted to read or binge over the course of the last year. So let me know if you've read any of these and your thoughts on them. Let me know if I have persuaded you to want to read any of them, and if so, which ones, in the comments down below. And yeah, that is all from me for today. So thank you so much for watching me yell at you for the best part of half an hour. I will catch you in another one soon. Bye y'all!